In 1802, the most powerful man on earth made a mistake. Napoleon Bonaparte had conquered Europe. He had defeated the Austrians, the Italians, and the Egyptians. His army was the terrifying Grande Armée, the most disciplined killing machine the world had ever seen. And he decided to send 40,000 of his best soldiers to a small island in the Caribbean. He thought it would be a police action. He thought it would take 3 weeks. Instead, 50,000 French soldiers would never go home. They didn't just lose. They were erased and defeated not by another empire, but by the very people they viewed as property. This is the story of the only successful slave revolt in human history. And it wasn't a battle, it was an extermination. Before it was Haiti, it was Saint-Domingue. And in 1789, it was the most valuable piece of real estate on the planet. It produced 60% of the world's coffee and 40% of Europe's sugar. It was the pearl of the Antilles. But that wealth was built on a graveyard. The French plantation owners were monsters of efficiency. They calculated that it was cheaper to work a slave to death in 3 years and buy a new one than to keep them alive. The death rate was so high that 50% of Africans died within a year of arriving. The French colonists lived like kings in the city of Cap Français, surrounded by opera houses and fine wine. They slept soundly, believing their whip-wielding overseers had everything under control. They outnumbered the slaves 10-1. But they forgot one thing. If you treat men like animals, eventually they will bite. August 14th, 1791. A storm is brewing over the northern plains. In a clearing known as Bois Caïman, hundreds of slaves gather in secret. They aren't just planning a strike. They are making a pact. A man named Duddy Boukman, a voodoo priest and carriage driver, stands before them. He drinks the blood of a sacrificed pig and swears a blood oath. The chant was simple. Coupe tête, boule quai, cut off the heads, burn down the houses. 8 days later, the pearl of the Antilles turned into hell on earth. On the night of August 22nd, 100,000 slaves rose simultaneously. They didn't have guns. They had machetes. They had torches. And they had decades of rage. Within weeks, 1,000 plantations were ashes. The sky over the island was so full of smoke that ships miles out at sea couldn't see the sun. The masters who had treated humans like cattle were suddenly faced with a reckoning they couldn't comprehend. From the chaos emerged a genius, Toussaint Louverture, a former slave. 45 years old, small, and quiet. The French underestimated him. They called him a bandit. They didn't realize they were facing one of the greatest military minds of the century. Toussaint didn't just fight, he played 4D chess. When the Spanish invaded from the east, he fought for them. When the British invaded from the west, he fought them too. Then, when revolutionary France promised to end slavery, he switched sides and drove the Spanish and British into the sea. By 1801, Toussaint Louverture was the ruler of the entire island. He drafted a constitution. He abolished slavery forever. He sent a copy to Napoleon Bonaparte, essentially saying, "We are equals now." Napoleon did not like that. He needed the sugar profits to fund his wars in Europe, and he couldn't have a former slave telling him what to do. So he prepared the fleet. February 1802. General Charles Leclerc, Napoleon's own brother-in-law, arrives with 20,000 veteran troops. His orders are secret but clear. Remove Toussaint, disarm the population, and then restore slavery. At first, the French steamrolled everything. They had cannons, muskets, and training. Toussaint knew he couldn't win a direct war, so he gave a terrifying order to his generals. Do not leave them a blade of grass. They burned their own cities. They poisoned the wells. They retreated into the jagged mountains. And they waited. Toussaint knew he had an ally that the French couldn't shoot, the yellow fever. When the rainy season hit, the mosquitoes came. The French soldiers, wearing heavy wool uniforms, began to drop like flies. They vomited black blood. Their skin turned yellow. General Leclerc wrote home to Napoleon, terrified. "You must send me 12,000 more men immediately. The disease is eating us alive." The French tried one last dirty trick. They invited Toussaint to a peace talk and arrested him. They shipped him to a frozen prison in the French Alps, where he died of pneumonia alone. But as Toussaint stepped onto the ship, he warned them, "In overthrowing me, you have cut down in Saint-Domingue only the trunk of the tree of liberty. It will spring up again from the roots, for they are numerous and deep." He was right. With Toussaint gone, The revolution was taken over by his second-in-command, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Toussaint was a diplomat. Dessalines was a butcher. He had been a field slave, whipped his entire life. He had no mercy in his heart for the French. The war turned genocidal. The French started drowning prisoners in the harbor. Dessalines responded by building gallows in sight of the French camps and hanging 500 officers at once. His motto was simple: liberté ou la mort, liberty or death. By late 1803, the French army was a skeleton crew. General Leclerc died from the fever. The survivors fled back to Europe broken. On January 1st, 1804, Dessalines declared the country independent. He renamed it Haiti, the ancient indigenous name for the land of mountains. It was the world's first black republic. The cost was unimaginable. 200,000 Haitians are dead, 75,000 French dead. But the message was sent to every slave owner from Virginia to Brazil: we are not your property. Napoleon lost his best army. He gave up on the Americas. Because of Haiti, he sold a massive chunk of land to the United States just months later, the Louisiana Purchase. The United States doubled in size because a group of slaves on a sugar island decided that death was better than bondage.